I will be recording the meeting this morning. So good morning and welcome to our Zoom meeting, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sue Llewellyn, the Business Manager at Haywards Heath Business Association. I'm delighted to say that we've got 3 of our members here this morning that are going to share their knowledge and expertise with you. So thanks to Jan, Michael and David. We're going to start the session with some short presentations and then we'll go into the question and answer session. If I can just ask, when the guys are presenting, if you can put yourselves on mute, it does just help with the background noise. So before we start, I just want to also introduce Claire Jones, our chair, who's going to say a few words.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces I just wanted to take a couple of moments to say that we've really, Sue, myself and the committee have really tried to keep up to date with like my husband's now going to walk past me. No, he's not going around the table now. We've really tried to keep up to date. Great timing. With what we've been able to offer all of our members. And we haven't stopped. The second we went into lockdown, we straight away went to Zoom, and we've had to completely ditch our events program, which is actually quite gutting because a lot of work was put into that. So we've had to be very reactive with what we offer. So we've tried to look a little bit into the future and think what's about to happen, what can we put in place. So I think we've done quite well. I mean, it's mostly Sue, to be honest, that's done this. So Sue, thank you for really driving it. And also going into the future, we are taking it almost week by week to see what we need to have in place next. The next event is going to be the end of June, and it's going to be networking at the Perrymount. I hope that's not too much of a giveaway. And again, it's going to be glass in hand, bit of relaxed, fun networking, because I know networking is really hard on Zoom, because lots of people are having Zoom calls morning, noon and night, and it gets really draining. So if we do a meeting, I want it to be valuable and of benefit, and actually entertaining. I want you to feel like you've learned something, had an enjoyable time. So we are going to run to time as well. We will finish this. I will clip our speakers' wings if they go on too long, and also we will stop promptly at 10 o'clock, so you can go on to the next thing as well. So our format is David from Formation, Jan from ABCOM, and then Mike from Italy, and they're going to talk for a few minutes each, and then it's open to questions. So I'm going to get David to kick off.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see that? Oh, is that working?
Yes. Yeah,
yes?
It is, yeah.
Yes. That possibly is a very artistic take on the COVID virus, I would imagine. So my name is David Lean. I'm the Chief Executive of Formation. We are a workplace specialist firm. What that really means is, if at any time you think about changes or improvements, bit of refurbishment to your workplace, wherever that is, we're hopefully a trusted advisor, so someone you can come and talk to. So one of the things, I'm just going to spend literally 60 seconds on where I think we are currently in the workplace, and then my colleague Paul, and I'm hoping Natasha's also on the call as well, they will talk in a tiny bit more detail. We should be through in about 5 minutes, so I'm going to crack on. So the first thing, I think what we're seeing in the workplace is that people are at different points of maturity. Some businesses are still looking at how they respond to COVID. Some are starting the recovery process, and obviously for things like shops, it's a very early part of that recovery process, and for some, it's still very much on the horizon. And then other businesses we're seeing have actually skipped through the first 2 stages very rapidly and are actually in thrive mode. So COVID's had less of an impact on them and their business. The third thing, which I'll get Paul just to elaborate on, is that one thing as workplace experts, as we talk to our customers and other organisations that are coming to us in businesses, is the core principles are that any workplace, whether it's your home, a small office, or a warehouse or a shop, it has to be safe, resilient and flexible. They're the 3 core things. And as Paul will talk about, is you have to put your staff and your customers central to everything that you look at. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much. I feel like we're on a government the afternoon session. Lots of thank yous. Hello, everyone.
Faces, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I'm Paul Atkinson. I'm Managing Director here at Formation. And my role is around delivering and maintaining workplaces that enhance businesses and that staff want to work in, and I've been doing that for quite a long time now. But really, as David said, it's all around the people, and actually with all of the health issues and the uncertainty, the focus has turned more onto that, particularly as you know, staff are a resource that can just walk, and particularly, you know, if they don't like things. So what we've seen, we've been discussing getting back to work with a number of our clients, quite a few actually, over the last few months, and they are all at different levels of thinking. Some of the medium to large businesses have set up whole teams that are developing these plans, and the smaller businesses, I think, are trying to find their way through it. The larger businesses definitely are much more cautious, and we're finding some of the big American clients are really getting some quite strong dictates from overseas on how they should be operating here. And there's a number of, I mean, Natasha can talk around some of the practicalities, but there's different things around preparing your buildings to go back to work, social distancing plans, but it all really comes down to communication. And I know that someone asked a question earlier around, you know, government advice, but there's definitely, the government seems to give a steer, but actually the interpretation of those rules is definitely coming down to the individual businesses and the risk analysis around that. When we talked to some companies about a month ago who were just starting to think about getting back to work or back to their offices, there was a flurry of activity, and actually what we found is that is definitely moving back at the minute. So we keep seeing businesses starting plans, having plans, developing plans, and actually they keep moving back, and suddenly people are talking about September, and possibly some of the major banking offices not until next year now. So there's a real, it's quite difficult in working around those timescales, but I think suddenly the government's going to release things, and actually that's where it's going to catch everyone out, and they're going to need to move on. But I think the common theme overall, I mean, particularly around the office environment, is that if your office, unless you work at home, is the same as it was before we started this COVID issue, it's probably not right. So it's around new ways of working, and I don't think the office is dead. A lot of people can't work from home. Some people don't want to work from home. So it's around just how we all find those new working solutions. So without further ado, if Natasha's here, she's got a few more details.
I am.
Hello.
Hey.
Here. Hiya. Good morning. So I was going to share my screen, which I'm not sure if I can. I'm going to have a look. Not sure. There's a few things. So what I'll discuss is we've been looking at larger corporate firms, I should think, than sort of local businesses. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah,
And Natasha,
sorry.
you can share your screen because you are a co-host now.
Okay, thank you. How do I do that? Oh, I see. I've got it now. Sorry.
Yeah, just at the bottom of your screen, you can share screen.
Yeah,
So I don't know if
it's
you can
coming
all see
through.
this.
It's coming through, Natasha. There, we've got it. We can see it.
Okay. So the behaviours to consider, I mean, these have been applied to larger corporate firms, but there are things that you need to think about, and we're quite a small practice, and when you actually consider how you get people into the office, you have to look at making sure it's absolutely been cleaned throughout before anyone returns to the office. Make sure you've put lots of sanitising stations in place in relation to maybe just as you come in, anything you touch, hold doors open where you can, obviously in line with fire regulations. If it's a fire door, don't just pop it open. Cleaning regime needs to be upped. So if you're realistically looking at about 20% of people returning back to the office, so it's important to consider making sure there's a cleaning regime through the day. So if someone is in and they go to use the bathrooms, everyone needs to be aware of making sure that they leave it as tidy as they entered it, and that they're sanitising their hands when they leave as well. In relation to workplace space, I don't know, obviously everyone's office space is different, but it is really important to designate desks can be used, which are 2 meters apart, and take away the chairs where there are opportunities for people to sit down, because if you remove them, they haven't got that option. So it kind of just eliminates that, and mark the table with maybe some red and white tape, I don't know, or a sticker saying don't use this table. We've encouraged people to bring in their own lunches, flasks of hot drinks, so you're not sharing tea point facilities. Bringing your own water, like maybe the business supplies water for everyone so they don't have to keep using the tap. So wherever there'd normally be a cross-contamination, you sort of reduce that risk. Where you're coming into entrances, make sure there's a hand sanitizer on each side, or inside at least. If you're going up and down the stairs, just be mindful, let people get up and down without passing each other. And if you've got a large enough staircase, you can obviously split it in two and have one-way systems, but I'm not thinking that would be the case. Maybe use meeting rooms as offices rather than meeting rooms, and encourage everyone to do Zoom meetings so you're not in one small space together. Where you can have windows open, and just making sure that it's kept really clean. I think that's the most important thing, is just keeping everything sanitised and making people mindful to keep washing their hands. That's all you can really do. I hope that's enough to give you some steer. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. And I think that's everything. And now I'm going to hand to, is it Michael?
Jan.
Jan.
Over to Jan.
I'm going to hand to Jan instead. There you go, Jan. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jan from Hubcom. I'm the Managing Director. We're an IT support company, but we also supply broadband, hosted phones, cabling, cloud solutions. So before the COVID crisis, we were a cloud-based company. We'd moved all our help desk into the cloud. We roll out Office 365, and our hosted phones as well are all cloud-based. So it was nothing for us to pick up and just move, and all the technicians work from home. We were on standby for all our customers, because we support small, medium businesses. Some of them have servers in-house. So we were on hand to go on site if needed. In our experience, a lot of our customers were already ready with some form of remote access, say VPN or cloud servers, and this might be for sales reps or staff that are on maternity leave. So we already had the systems in place, and it was all documented well, and it was easy to replicate when that trigger was pulled, and all the businesses had to decamp and start working from home. So we went from business as usual to COVID, which was business as unusual, and now it's business as survival. So just making sure what have we learned from everything. We, as a business, we've been busy. We've been providing laptops and PCs. We've gotten businesses in place, and now we're just planning everybody's return, how many people are going to return. But the biggest thing we saw was collaboration and the use of Microsoft Teams, especially for us. And that has been a real interesting turn of events, because like within Teams, we've learned about training, empowering staff, audit trails, and just keeping things nice and cozy, you know, keeping data and people in place. So yeah, importantly, security hygiene as well, just trying to update our customers with newsletters, and in the background, keeping an eye on all the systems. So as we move back out of home base, we're really pushing for our customers and new customers to move to Teams as a way of collaboration. So I'm just going to move to a quick slide in a moment. Share screen, and it should be somewhere on here. Give me a moment. No, I didn't plan that well. Hang on a second. So, I mean, key things that we've always been banging on about are things like switching on multi-factor authentication for Microsoft Office. It's an extra layer and it stops the cyber attacks happening, or it minimizes them. Teaching staff to beware of phishing. So there was a lot of COVID-19 emails going out there that were trying to get you to impart with your information so that they can get into your systems. Backing up the data, so testing and verifying was really important. Something called shadow IT is a concept where when people are displaced and moved into their homes, working from homes, they start using their own systems because there isn't that cohesion of IT support or in-house IT managing all the systems, because suddenly we've got lots of moving parts, lots of people working from home. So if people are coming back into the office, it'd be good because then you can kind of get everything streamlined and working again and secure, patched, etc. Also importantly is checking for updates. We have a lot of software running on all our customers' machines that keep things patched. So that's what we were doing in the background. I think importantly is to train staff as they look to move back to work, or if they stay in situ and they keep working remotely. I think it's important employers look to train them up so that they're more cyber sensitive and they're more aware of what's going on. Statistics, Microsoft Teams in April 2020 seen a rise up to about 75 million users. The NHS has absolutely adopted it as a way of communicating between staff. Also in the background, it's important that things like Office 365 aren't neglected, and that under the hood, things like the secure score, security and compliance, all those aspects are tweaked and kept working well. One of the things that will come from this, Michael wrote a BYOD policy, which is a bring your own device policy, which is really important. So if your workers remain at home, there's a policy that you're welcome to take and use and adapt, and we can help implement any aspect of it. But it's really a kind of a guidance on how people carrying on with their own equipment from home but accessing company data need to be monitored or policed a little bit. Yeah, and if anyone's interested in a free Teams evaluation, we'll help set up, advise, that's not a problem. And there are two words that make up crisis in Chinese, Weiji. It's basically danger and opportunity. So that's what we see. And that's it. Yeah, that's it from me. Over to Michael. Hello, Michael.
Right. Yes, I'm here. Okay. Right. Good morning, everybody. My name's Michael Milne. I'm a barrister. My company is called Elisi Expert Legal Compliance Advisors. And Elisi is the only word probably you don't recognize, means the solution in Greek. The areas that we specialize in is data protection, including GDPR, and we also offer the data protection officer role to organizations. We deal with employment law, and we deal with health and safety, including fire safety, fire risk assessments, and risk assessments in general. We also deal with construction health and safety, including CDM regulations. The main things that we do within that is we undertake audits of levels of compliance in these areas. We write legally compliant policies and procedures in all areas. We create forms and record keeping systems, and we deal with regulators on behalf of our clients. And finally, we provide a telephone and quick email response facility to our retained clients. That's an unlimited facility. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do. Thank you. And my email address is in the chat. So if you do need to contact me, you can find it there and drop me a line. Thank you.
Great. Is there any more from you, Mike, or do you want to open up to questions?
No, we'll go straight to questions. That's fine.
Great. Has anybody got anything? I'm just trying to think the best way of doing this. We normally do a physical hands up, but I've got 2 screens. So we might, if you go into the participants, and if you want to ask a question, go to the symbol which says hands up, which you should be able to see. Why can't I see that? So, can you, normally it's on the participants, isn't it? To put your hand, to raise your hand.
Yeah, you can just.
It says raise hand on the right-hand side of my list.
Yeah, you can. Right,
yeah.
It doesn't on mine. It might be because I'm a co-host. I'm not sure. Anyway, anybody got a question they'd like to ask? Do you know what? I'm going to kick it off. Actually, I'm going to get a word in when I can. Thank you, first of all. Actually, thank you, because it's great to have this resource within our own community. I think it's fantastic, and I definitely encourage anybody who doesn't get everything answered today to contact these guys. I'm sure that you'd be happy. I'm sure you'd be happy to answer more questions, especially if something's quite complicated. My concern is, and having seen what's happened in just the last 2 weeks since the lockdown has been just released a little bit, is everyone's gone nuts. It feels like no one's really complying to social distancing from what I can see. Not no one. I'm seeing a lot of people not complying. So my concern is, in an office environment, after about 24 hours, everyone's going to kind of not worry so much. What do you think you can do as staff members to encourage compliance, to actually adhere to these? Because it's going to be a long time that you're going to have to not boil a kettle, keep wiping down the toilet taps, and and how do you get people to do that for this length of time?
I think it's quite difficult, the reality. I think that in the offices we've looked at, the initial one's been around reducing numbers down heavily. So sort of by default, you're sort of enforcing a certain amount of circulation, but it comes down to, it does have to be a buy-in from the staff, and they've got to be engaged in that process. And I think in the work environment, I suppose maybe there's a different mentality. If you set it up right from the beginning, you show that you're caring as a business, and you set those, I think you've got to have those clear rules and procedures in place that everyone's inducted and gets involved with.
I was going to say that, actually. The important thing is the communication to the staff and having their approval for returning back to the office, because you have to communicate that to them and say, look, we're opening the office, and obviously there is a decision to be made within their own households of whether or not health-wise people in their house can actually take the load if it was to come back into the home. So there is a little bit of HR involved in that sort of process. And I think communicating on email, so it's recorded, that you have information that you're basically setting parameters and you're setting the office up for their safe return. And then it is a little bit of a policing process internally. So I do think it's quite important that someone takes responsibility, because you'll have someone who's in charge of health and safety within your office. They will need to be quite vigilant in relation to saying, come on guys, you can't be doing that, or if you've forgotten your tea today, supply them with an alternative. So maybe have a separate flask that they can then have filled up. So it's having those elements there to sort of protect everyone, really.
What I'm going to do, oh, sorry.
So I was going to say, what I think was interesting was came out on the news today was also around, without going on to the tracing conversation, but around the issue to do with, if in a workplace there are COVID cases and the implications of that, it's huge for everyone going forwards. So I think that mindset might assist in everyone remembering that actually, if you're not careful, you're back into lockdown again. So hopefully that has some sort of impact, but it does involve people's buy-in. And
that's a good point, Paul. Actually, Rhonda, I'm going to bring you in because you're HR. Do you think you've got any pearls of wisdom you could add to that?
Yeah. Absolutely, Claire, and hello. And just to explain, we are actually married and do live in the same house. throughout lockdown.
Really?
So,
Oh my God.
yes, sorry if that's news to you. So yes, I'm Rhonda Martin. This is my husband Peter, and yeah, People Magic is all about HR, and I would absolutely support everything that you're saying, and it's great to hear about this. Organisations and
sorry, keep going, Rhonda.
Yeah, that they can be taking to actually support people in getting back to work. But I think what we are seeing and what we would say is underpinning that, it's all about communication. What we know is that there is no blueprint to look back on and say, actually, that worked well last time. So we do also know that we know the people we work with, we know our staff, we know that they're compliant in the main. There's always going to be the one or two exceptions, deal with those in a slightly different way. But we also are very aware from lots of conversation that colleagues care about colleagues. So I would absolutely support and endorse the comment that was made earlier. Talk to people, make sure they know what's expected, and then support them in coming back to the workplace. Everyone's having different experiences. Everybody has, in ways I think that perhaps workplaces haven't had to consider before. The social issues and the personal issues that people have got going on are as important this time. There's all sorts of other impacts. Schools are closed, you've got carer responsibilities. We still have a huge element of the population shielding, different from self-isolating. They've been told they're vulnerable and their families are being impacted too. So what we would say from an HR point of view, and by all means talk to us if you think there's anything that we can help you with, or you just want to chat through, is keep speaking to your staff. Just remind them that you can make up policy that you can share with them to take care of any situations that you've got. You can document that with them, but do it collaboratively. Most people, if you talk to them, will tell you what their concerns are. And you can build all of those into the things that you are doing. I don't know, I mean, you have...
The only thing I would add is I think there's an assumption that everyone's dying to run back to work. I think actually some of our experience is that now people have got used to working remotely, they want to only come back when they're safe, and they know they're going to be safe and that their organisations are going to look after them. So they're looking to us as people managers to make sure that they're going to be safe when they come back. I think some will be looking for much more flexibility going forward, and again we can talk to people about that, because I think that's going to be the new norm, flexibility. And yeah, just don't assume, I think, that everyone's desperate to come back, because I don't think they are.
That's another minefield that in itself, isn't it? Isn't it, Peter? So yeah. I'm just going to jump into some of the questions that have come through. Sorry to just to jump in there. Richard Harms, you had a question.
I did. Right. So I don't actually have an office space, but obviously what I'd be considering doing would be working from a co-shared space. So, you know, the likes of the WeWork, etc.
You mean Fresh Mills? Fresh Mills.
Sorry, yes, behind me. So with that in mind, how do you foresee, I suppose, sort of patrolling or, you know, management of co-shared office spaces in these circumstances, you know, where you've got a lot of people who not just work in those spaces from time to time, but obviously additional businesses obviously coming into those spaces as well?
It might be worth bringing Zoe in on this as well.
I mean,
throw you under the bus.
I think that I think there's great opportunity for the co-working spaces. I think that particularly for places like around here where people don't want to travel to London so much maybe, and for local towns, you know, it could be a real opportunity for some rejuvenation. But as with everyone else, yeah, the way that they operate those facilities needs some consideration. But you'd hope that, you know, someone that maybe went to Canary Wharf every day of the week might have a couple of days working at home, maybe a day or two in Zoe's facility, and then you know, up to London one day a week. So then it's you know, it's working through the, you know, how you operate those buildings, isn't it, Zoe? And coming up with a system where people feel safe and reassured. In those
What's the latest? So for anyone who doesn't, Zoe's founder, CEO of Fresh Mills. I'm not quite sure what your title is. Head honcho of Fresh Mills, a co-working space. So what's the latest in your premise?
So we've worked with our health and safety assessor, and he is, so we've got hand sanitizer everywhere. We're lucky, we've got 2 staircases. So we have been able to operate a system where you go in the front, and if you're going up the stairs, you use the front staircase. If you're going down the stairs or exiting the building, you use the rear staircases. We've got hand sanitizer everywhere. We have currently, we're only set up for the fixed offices to have people in. We've got floor markings so that it's a one-way system around each of the individual floors, as well as the staircases. So a lot of the things actually that Natasha was speaking about earlier are the things that we've had. We've written our policy, our risk assessment. We're speaking to each of the tenants about that. There's deep cleaning going on every night. We clean twice during the day, all the communal spaces and things, and you know, that exactly what Natasha was talking about. In terms of the co-working, I'm actually we're starting to look at how we pull that together to make sure, at the moment, we know all of our co-workers. We have a personal relationship with everybody that comes into the building. So therefore it makes it easier to police. That there is an element where I as the owner of the building and the business, I am responsible for every single person who's in that building, whether they work for me or not, whether they're a co-worker or in a fixed office. So it's making sure that we, in a very nice way, but we're very firm about it, is we've put these procedures in to protect everybody in the building. And if you are not prepared to follow them, then I'm afraid you just can't use the facilities, because we can't have people not following them. We have to, you know, I have a responsibility. If that building is full, there's 154 people in there, and that's 154 people that I'm responsible for. So we're trying to do everything collaboratively. We do have stuff in place that when we bring the co-working back in, that we will ensure that those things are continued. And there's obviously 3 of us who work for Fresh Mills who will just constantly be making sure that all those things, and speaking to people, making sure they understand, because it's just very serious. You know,
I think that landlord tenant cooperation is going to be important going forward. So whether, you know, it's co-working space, whether you lease an office, I think historically it's always been a bit of a sort of slightly at arm's length, maybe not the co-working, but I think that working together is definitely going to be important. That's slightly more, you know, more collaborative, open discussions. I think we've all got to, we're all in it together.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, it's not just the landlord, the tenant, that we've got to find a solution that everyone can, you know, can work towards.
And I think people that employ, even if you're a very small business and you've got a limited number of your team, you know, people take that responsibility seriously. I think there's very few people that will feel comfortable with, I'm sure there'll always be some, but nobody wants to be responsible for hurting somebody else and hurting somebody else's family. And actually, I think, as Rhonda said, by talking to people and explaining it to them and going through all the procedures so that people really understand it, I think most people will buy into it.
Can I just ask, sorry, off the back of that then, would it be a case of sort of, you know, if someone's coming into the building, then it would be you are allocated a desk rather than actually just going and sitting somewhere for a period of time, and then, you know, so the people typically within spaces like that will jump from one place to another, depending on, I suppose, how they feel at the time of the day.
Yes, I mean, as I say, we are having discussions with our health and safety guys about it. It's the best way of doing it, but the most likely, he hasn't signed anything off yet, so I have to be a bit careful. But the most likely is you will have to, whereas at the moment somebody can take a package and they can come in anytime and use whatever space is available to them, is that what we will probably do is we will ask people to book. So even if you're coming in for 30 minutes, you book that 30 minutes, we will allocate you a desk so that you are 2 meters away from somebody, you're protected, that desk has not been used by anybody else. And then that desk, even if you're in for 30 minutes, we wouldn't book it for another 30 minutes afterwards. It will be left for a certain period of time that's within the health and safety guidelines. It will be cleaned. and all of those things will be done. And the shared meeting spaces we have at the moment, even the informal ones, will not be open. So it would be, if we, you know, people could use them as an individual, but we wouldn't have 4 people sitting in one of the copper pods.
With all of this should come under the risk assessments that are done. You've got risk assessments that are done on part of the individual company or office or whatever, but also anyone who's involved in this in the premises has got to be part of either combined risk assessments where it's for the common areas, or indeed a joint risk assessment where they're involved. So all of these things should be dealt with in a risk assessment process.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to hand over to Steve. You have a question next.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I enjoyed the presentations, found Natasha's very interesting, seeing what the environments are like regarding offices and such like. I don't have such a dilemma, this is it. And but nonetheless, you know, you still have to be wary. So yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, just really directed at Michael. It's really about the track and trace scenario that's applying in GDPR. From what I gather, you know, if you're spotted, you've mingled, you've stepped, I'd be interested to know actually who is actually going to go for this track and trace. It's important that we all do it. But the question is, you know, if you're asked by someone to furnish data of people that you've been with, i.e. give them contact details, which I believe is the way it's going to be, I don't know. Is that not compromising GDPR regulations if you haven't got their overt permission to do so?
Certainly where you're getting information, the Information Commissioner's Office will provide guidance on this because it's constantly changing. They've already said that they're going to deal with this whole area with COVID-19 on almost an ongoing basis, taking everything into consideration rather than just worrying about what the lesser of the regulations happen to be. For example, they've issued guidance on temperature testing if people want to do that kind of thing. So, and there's also government guidance on a whole range of measures that will also feed into this. And certainly getting back to mentioning before about that risk assessment, the government have, I won't go through the whole list here, but they've got guidance on all manner of areas, including offices, factories, construction, so on and so forth. So there's very specific guidance that's going to be of help for people, in part to do their risk assessment, but also in their conversations with people that are involved. And just to reiterate what was said before, if you've got employees, you want employees to be part of that risk assessment process. So it's sort of communication plus, in other words, find out what they think and let them be part of the solution.
Fantastic, thanks.
Okay.
Mike. Rhonda, you had your hand up briefly there. It went down again.
Sorry, it was Peter. It was a question actually for Zoe while she was talking. I don't want to lower the tone, but I was particularly curious, with that many people potentially in the office, what the toilet arrangements are, because this seems to come up quite a bit. People are asking about, because that's a share as a concern, because it's a shared facility, and one where, you know, potentially there's greatest risk for infection. What guidelines have you put in place? I'm just curious.
Well, at the moment, I mean, we will not be at capacity anytime soon, because we simply couldn't keep the 2 metre social distancing. But in terms of the toilets, where our toilets are situated, it enables us to have a clear line of sight, which is the first thing. That individual facilities, they'll each have sanitizer as well as hand washing. We've put signage up, and then we're talking to, once the co-working, at the moment we've got additional cleaning going on, but if we are to open the co-working, that will be increased again.
Okay, does that answer your question, Peter?
I was just interested. I was wondering whether you were restricting number of people in there and things like that.
Well, they're in their individual cubicles, so that does help. And at the moment, because we've only got our fixed offices going back, and I have to say a number of them aren't coming back. You know, they're not. They've decided that for the time being, devices work from home if you can, if it's working for their employees. But it is something that we are having. Probably, I speak to our health and safety guy twice a week. So as things change, when the office becomes busier, if we open the co-working, all of those measures will be increased as we go along. And it well may be that we need to have some kind of system whereby we're only allowing so many people through the doors towards the toilets at any one time.
Okay, thank you.
I know from doing planning for other companies, we've done it so that you have 2 metre queuing, very much like the supermarket, depending if it's a shared toilet facility. Yeah. So you only allow, depending on the size again of the actual toilet facilities, maybe only 2 people using that facility at one time, and there being a sort of process of someone monitoring that somehow. It is actually quite difficult to monitor. Some scenarios have actually held the main lobby doors open to the toilet so that there's no touching of doors.
Yeah, that's
depending
what
on
we've
how it's laid out. It's quite difficult.
I mean, and also maybe blocking off certain cubicles so that you're keeping people separate if there are multiple facilities in there.
I mean, some of our clients have gone one step further. So where you've got a shared facility, a number of cubicles, they're actually have effectively moved the toilet lock to the lobby door as you come in. So actually, if you've got a toilet with 3 cubicles, they're effectively making it one toilet block. And so I suppose those pinch points start to dictate then potential numbers you can have in the building. As things like lifts, you know, if you've got to get to the 50th floor of a building, the maths simply don't work with having a queue half a mile long outside trying to get people in. So it really starts then to dictate actually with the current understanding of social distancing, how many people you can get back practically to some of these environments.
Thanks, Paul. Donna, you have a question.
I do, thank you very much. It was about air conditioning in offices. I've been into the office this week and moved desks, one-way systems, signposted, cleaned
Donna,
everything.
where are you from, Donna? I'm sorry.
I'm actually based in Brighton from a travel company.
Right.
Slightly outside your area, but Jan invited me to attend. So I work for a travel business. So there's no one in the office at the moment, but we're looking at maybe having 6 out of 45 go back in the next week or so. But our office is air conditioned and quite hot, got a lot of windows, and I wondered if there's any rules around using air conditioning, because obviously that's just circulating the air, and it sort of makes a mockery of having 2 metre distance and one-way systems. I didn't know what anyone else has come across that.
It is an issue, and I think that so as offices have become, I don't know whether, has yours got openable windows?
Yes.
Yeah, so you've got some advantage there. So as offices have got more sealed over the years, you're right, the recirculation of the air conditioning is potentially an issue at the moment. It's not my specialist subject, but I spoke to someone yesterday where I think CIBSE and some of the technical bodies are looking at guidance around it, but in terms that they're looking at where you've got the recirculation, because most air conditioning systems, you're right, are just moving air. There's a degree of fresh air, but moving it around. They're looking at HEPA filters, at ultraviolet, filters and things like that. But I mean, it's a potentially huge issue with how most offices are heat and cooled. But yeah, it is on the radar. We could certainly come back with a bit more information on that, but it is a consideration in that overall, back to the risk assessments again. If everyone's being very careful.
Is there, Paul? There's no position at the moment.
No, I mean, I think it's a developing field, but it's speaking to one of the mechanical consultants yesterday, they are and what's happening actually, one of the issues that's coming in around some of the filtration, suddenly all of the lead times have rocketed on all these items. So actually, if you wanted to put some HEPA filters into your air conditioning, I don't think for love nor money you could buy them for 2 to 3 months now. So it does start to become a bit complicated, but it is definitely an issue that people are looking into.
I think you're probably likely to have masks similar to what's being suggested for airline travel, merely because we've got a similar thing, air being recirculated, and also close proximity. So that might be one thing that might come up. I'm not saying, but again, we need to see what the experts in that area are recommending.
Thank you. I've got a concern, not necessarily a question, and I'd be interested to know how you think this should be handled. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm expecting a deluge of people being shopped for bad COVID systems, whether that's arrows in the wrong way, and people going on their phones and then clicking onto social media and shopping a company for, and I'm going to loathe that. I'm going to dread it, and it's going to really me off. So any suggestions how you think businesses could actually, I don't know if this is your remit exactly, but it's one of my concerns that I think that if we could nip it in the bud kind of thing before it becomes an issue.
One of the things we've talked about at Formation with our customers is it's a bit like when we move them from a workplace to another workplace, an office to another office. You know, you have all the communication plans and everyone has their boxes and they know how it's going to be on the day. But a lot of it is saying it's best endeavours. So it's a bit like when we've all moved offices and you plug your computer in, it doesn't work, you have a sense of humour failure. So you call that stuff out early. So a lot of it is actually saying it's best endeavours, and there will be some schoolboy errors, not because we're being devious or anything, it's just the way things play out. Would you say, Paul? It's almost a sort of, because I think the way that people return to the workplace will be modular. It's not a sort of, and we're back. It's going to be an evolution. It's going to be modular. And I think communication underpins everything. So on the original slide I put out, I said, people have to be central to it, your staff and your customers.
I think the potential for reputational damage is considerable, and if you've not been shown to at least give it a good go, it quite quickly can come back to bite you. I think, like I said a little bit earlier, with the that open dialogue, landlord, tenant, directors and staff, I suppose it's around those and having an open means of communication. But it is, as we say to our own staff, when we catch up with them weekly, it's evolving. We don't necessarily know all the answers. We're all working through this together.
But they're able to surface stuff, if they're able to surface stuff directly to us, because to Claire's point, it's easy to get onto social media, and I've done it 1 or 2 times in the last couple of years where the easiest way to complain to a company is to do it on Twitter, which just feels wrong. It's just I'll get a quicker response. So if the communication channels, so I'm thinking about our staff, if they spot stuff either on client site, they're able to escalate it to us. It's easy, and we'll take it seriously and we'll act on it. I think that's the way home on this.
And I think especially in retail where you've got less relationship with the store, especially if it's a chain store. And I can see it now. I can see the photographs going up saying no one's social distancing here, or no hand sanitizer here, or look where that staff member is. And I just think it's about helping businesses and even as consumers to understand the pressures under which so many businesses are as well. Sorry, I want to go back to some more questions. I've seen some hands come up. I don't know who was first, Rhonda or Richard. Whoever's first.
I think we just jump in on the conversation that was going on, and to your point and to your concern, I think our experience is with staff who are equally likely to complain as the general public, giving them somewhere that they can go. They very clearly know that someone's going to listen to them, because I think that's what it's about. Lots of this is sparked by fear and concern, as much as having perhaps one's 10 minutes of going viral. But I think having somewhere that you know you can go to, and having the person that is hearing that question actually deal with it properly, because how many of us have been sent to either customer services or someone in a line manager or HR where actually we don't feel that we've been listened to. So doing what you can to make sure that there is a process that properly hears what people are concerned about is likely to limit it from an employment point of view, in our experience. And equally, additional signage that says, if you do notice anything that we're not doing so well, we'd really encourage you to talk to X, or ring this number or contact us here, I think does encourage people to, in the moment, you just want somewhere to vent. So doing anything you can to actually funnel that is, would be our advice on encouraging people.
Within retail, I think they're also talking about a type of kite mark as well that businesses can get, which show that they're serious about the way they're approaching it. Not sure about the detail of that, but I think there's more to come. And again, as Rhonda said, if you're encouraging people to talk to you first, it can take the steam out of them going on social media.
Thanks,
I think it's everyone's, we're all in it together. I came across an example recently where there was a genuine feeling amongst some of the staff that the directors were hiding away and possibly sitting in, some garden somewhere.
Ivory Tower.
Yeah, and I think that comes to, that's going to flare up very quickly.
There are a lot of things that we don't yet know that are just around the corner, I fear.
This will feed into the issue of people saying they don't want to come back to work because they don't think it's safe as well. Now, legally, without going into massive amounts of detail, but it does come under the Employment Rights Act, and which at one point basically says if you feel that it's if you've got a reasonable suspicion that it's a dangerous place to be, then you can actually say, yeah, I'm not, you can refuse to come in on the one hand, but it does, the belief has to be reasonable. And then there's a whole reasonableness test that has to be taken into consideration. But people are going to need to be aware that could possibly arise, and that also feeds into a sort of COVID whistleblowing situation. So it's quite, it has to be dealt with, as Rhonda said, with a high degree of sensitivity. But equally, what you don't want is ne'er-do-wells and creating unnecessary problems. But what I would always suggest is that if people have got a problem, always ask them to put it in writing and what the issue is and what that's based on, because very often that takes the sting out of the instant reaction to something, or somebody making a little bit potentially mischief as well, because we've got that to take into consideration. But it does need to be considered, definitely.
Thanks, Mike. Richard, another question from you.
Yeah. So so for example, my partner, she works in a shared office, which is, she's got, her business has got a floor of say 15 or 30 people. Where does the responsibility lie to ensure that business is compliant? Does it lie with the landlord, or does it lie with the managing director of that company to ensure that the building is compliant?
Mike, is that you?
If you like, it's a bit like a fire risk assessment. The landlord of the building is responsible for the common walkways and in and out and so on and so forth, the access, the egress, all that kind of thing. And then the individual, once you get into the individual company within that building, they are responsible. So essentially, it's going to simplify it. They're responsible for their bit and the landlord is responsible for his part. But then, as we said before, with a risk assessment, then the landlord needs to be involved in the part that overlaps the two things together. So it's not one or the other. It's a bit of a combination, if that's helpful.
Does that answer your question, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for example, toilets and common shared spaces, I'm assuming, would be the responsibility of both parties. And then obviously, sort of the working desk spaces would be the responsibility of those managing directors, etc.
Great, thanks, Richard. James and Kate, and then we might wrap it up for questions then, because we're coming up to 10 o'clock. So go, James.
Thanks, Claire. So really appreciate everybody's comments. Understand that a lot of it is based around the physical premises, your building, your staff, working with people there. I suppose I have a question not aimed at anybody in particular. In relation to meeting with clients and customers, clearly we've been doing an awful lot by Zoom and phone call recently, but what's the general consensus around the call with regards to resuming face-to-face meetings with clients and prospective clients? When do people think that they're going to be likely to go and see new people, see existing people without technology, either in their offices or externally? Has anybody got a view on that?
Well, but I think Paul was out yesterday, weren't you, Paul? You're
yeah.
right.
So we're related to as a construction industry, so we have to go and look at things. So I suppose that you can't get away from. Talking to our corporate clients, I can't see on the short to medium term horizon any of those meetings happening.
What about if they were outside and in one scenario?
I think they can still be, but I think most of them haven't gone back to their offices yet.
No.
So I think there's a two-stage process here. I think there's actually, a couple of our larger clients there, there's nobody in the office, and then they're only looking at taking a very skeleton staff back in, well, they were going to do it mid of next month, and I think they pushed that back. Now they're looking at September and possibly stretching beyond that. So those meetings, I just don't think are going to happen in the short to medium term at all. Apart from if you have to, you can't do it face to face. So, a site visit or something like that. I mean, that's my gut feeling. I don't know if anyone has a different opinion.
I agree, but the advice is changing on a weekly basis from the government. So it could be they're looking now at changing the licensing laws for pubs and bringing it forward and opening pubs in June, I heard this morning on the radio. So it's forever changing. And also the 2 metre distance as well could be reduced. So there is some hope that things could get a little easier.
I think people would like to. I think there'll come a stage where actually, if you could go and meet someone outside of a cafe for a coffee as a change to always doing the Zoom, I think there'll become a time where that, particularly when the weather's nice, that would be desirable. But in the offices, I can't see it happening anytime soon.
No, especially if you've got to get on public transport to meet up and that sort of thing. Thanks, Paul. Kate, I'm going to take. Did you have a question? I saw your hand in the air. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, do you just want to unmute yourself, Kate?
Yeah, I've done it. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I was just going back to the air conditioning point with the offices and the landlord and tenants. Obviously, I guess that's a bit of a muddy area. Who's to be responsible for that? Would that be the landlord providing that, or is it the tenant who has the upkeep? So not really very important, actually.
Again, I think it probably comes down to that flow of, as Michael said, the different responsibility, who maintains it, who looks after it. But I think it's going to have to be a joint, often, unless it's a purely tenant installed facility where it's their total responsibility. I suspect if it's a shared or a landlord system, there's a chain of joint responsibility in those.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Right, and Sue, you had one last question for the council as well that you wanted to just check in with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Will's still here actually, but I think we've got Stephen Hillier on the call from the council. There was a question that had been submitted in advance, just asking actually if there are going to be any council grants available if businesses need to do any remodelling. Stephen, would you be able to jump in there and maybe answer this one for us?
Yeah, good morning, Sue. The answer is we don't know yet. As Sue and others might have mentioned, it got raised in a call earlier in the week with some various business leaders, that this is something that is going to be needed. So we've got a limited pot of money, well, it's less than limited because the councils, like everybody else, has been hit financially hugely. And we're working out what we want to do with our small business grants scheme, and whether we want to change it around to help people help get out of COVID. Mims Davis MP's also gone to central government with that message, going, right, you know, this is something else we've not thought of. Businesses are going to need some capital to help them reconfigure their offices, etc., for safe working. So the answer is, I don't know yet, but the word is out there that this is an important thing for businesses.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That actually brings us very neatly to 10 o'clock, and as promised, I'm going to bring this to an end. Thank you so much for your participation. Again, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think that's been really valuable. And firstly, on the level of knowledge that I've gained from this, because I'm not only a business, I'm actually a consumer, and actually I go into business premises. So, and if that starts to happen, I think I'm now much more knowledgeable of what I should expect, and that helps me in all the hats that I wear. So thanks so much for the panel. Big round of applause for helping us out there, and Rhonda and everyone else who chipped in with their expert help as well, so thank you. Do please spread the word. If you know a business that is struggling, feeling isolated, and isn't getting access to all the stuff that they need, please put them in touch with the HHBA, because I think we are a valuable sort of communication line that helps to distribute really valid information. We've got the council as well. Thank you, Steve and Will, for being on this call as well, who have been really on standby for helping so many businesses. I've seen it. I've seen businesses get hands-on grants quicker because they were HHBA members. And if you're a nano business, it's £10 a month, which I think is just excellent value. And also there's that feeling of community, which I think now we're all working from home, we're missing that social contact with people and having to share problems and all this sort of stuff. So the fact that we're able to build this here is fantastic, and it makes my heart sing. So thank you so much for being here today. I hope to see you on the can't remember the date of the next meeting, 24th, I want to say. Oh, Sue's on mute.
I was just going to say, we haven't actually finalised it as yet, but it's going to be towards the end of June when we run the next networking meeting. And then we've got one in the pipeline as well with the business doctors coming up as well.
In July. And then we're not looking any further than that, because we can't. So thank you for your support, and look forward to seeing you at the next HHBA meeting. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, guys. I'm not going anywhere. Brilliant.
Can I just ask a quick question? I'm quite happy to be part of an Ask the Expert if you feel that travel is something that you want people to ask about in the future.
Thank you.
I appreciate being with other people anyway, and nice to see you all. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
That's definitely worth bearing in mind, because
people are going to start thinking about travel and about their holidays. You know, I think a lot of people will have missed out on things so far this year, so it's definitely going to be something.
Is this quarantine, this 14-day quarantine thing? I think once we know more about that and how long it's going to be in place, and
tell me about it. It's very counterproductive, but I can understand the logic of it, but it should have been brought in several months ago, really, shouldn't it? Quite clearly.
Yeah, I find it astonishing to think the amount of people that have come through the country already at its peak. It's too late. The horse has bolted.
It has
and all the other European countries are all opening up in their airports as well. So yeah. Typical.
We will see.
Steve, I was
brilliant. Thank you, Steve.
In email contact with a B&B that I stay at a lot in the south of France, and they said they are now open for B&B, but the breakfast room is not open. The breakfast is room service only. So, but they are actually open for business now, and they're now waiting for the French government to give them clearance, because they have a restaurant there as well, but the restaurant is still closed, but you can actually stay there. So that's yesterday.
That's total rebranding for Airbnb. It's Airbnb.
It's B&B, it's the hotel. It's the hotel as opposed to
bring your own sheets.
Yeah. And I think do you know what? With a level of common sense and, you know, let's be grown up about this, I think things can carry on. So it's good to know. It's good to know that, and you know, staying in a one room and no one come into it, and then it's deep cleaned, and then you leave, and it all seems perfectly sensible.